Hi, I'm Gavin Carlson, and this is Out of Bounds, Daily Bruin Sports Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Out of Bounds, the official sports podcast of the Daily Bruin. As always, I'm your host, Gavin Carlson, a fourth-year sports staff writer here at the Daily Bruin, and I'm joined by the trio once again, my other two fantastic guests. First off, my boss, I'm going to say it every episode, it's the sports editor of the Daily Bruin, Joseph Crosby. How you doing, buddy?
Gavin, I'm having a little bit of a bad hair day, and that's actually important now because we're on video, so I'm feeling a little nervy.
It looks great to me. Don't worry about it. We'll see. I mean, this guy's hair is never looking poor. It's Jack Nelson, a sports senior staff writer at the Daily Bruin with fantastic hair. Jack, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm vibing. I'm back here with the dream team. I'm excited, man. Let's talk some football.
Heck yes. We are recording once again on a Sunday directly after UCLA blew out San Diego State 35-10 at Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego. Me and Joseph were there for the game. Before we start, I have to do, as always, shout out to our amazing camera lady, Zoë Busenberg, behind the camera. Check out on YouTube to see this beautiful setup. It's kind of changing every week. But yes, we were at Snapdragon, Joseph and I. Jack was there as well in the crowd. The story was Dante Moore. We didn't know who was going to be the starter coming into the week. Chip Kelly didn't say anything, unlike week one. So literally until the very first offensive snap of the game, we did not know who the quarterback was going to be. Dante rolls out there, 2 drives, only 24 yards the first 2 drives, I believe. Not a sharp start. I guess we'll start with Joseph. What did you think of Dante kind of slowing into things with the 2 poor drives, and obviously came out in that third drive, 81-yard touchdown to Josiah Norwood? I guess just what were your opinion on the way Chip Kelly handled things with Dante kind of just being thrown out there quietly?
Yeah, I think those first 2 drives, they were kind of feeling things out and trying to get a sense of what the environment might be like in Snapdragon and how they might kind of react to that. And then come that third drive, they're a little more ready to maybe push the envelope, and that play action play gets the safeties drawn in, and you can hit Norwood, and then he's got no one but in between him and the end zone. So, and that was probably set up a little bit by running the ball a little more than they did pass, because I think he only attempted 3 passes on those first 2 drives. And so they ended up being able to kind of exploit that and go over the middle, and then have no one in the deep in the secondary.
I totally agree. I think it was very conservative to start. It's always interesting watching the beginning of games and how a play caller operates, because really the first drive, maybe the first 2 drives are pretty scripted. Like Chip Kelly during the week has most likely written down what 3 plays are going to be run the first 3 plays, barring some disaster, barring a 5-yard loss on first down or something. It's pretty decided, like, all right, we're going to come out and we're going to run the ball to Carson Steele. I think they threw an out route to Carson Ryan on second down in the first drive of the game. Like, I don't think that's a read that Dante makes in the middle of the game. We are scripting this play to throw to Carson Ryan, right? So I think, especially with it being Dante's first start, I think Chip was very conservative. Eventually, like you said, they opened things up, the play action, Josiah Norwood, big ball down the field, and a lot of green grass. San Diego State responds with the touchdown, and a lot of people are going to be talking about the secondary. Devin Kirkwood gets beat on that one. I thought it was fine coverage and just a great throw by Jalen Maiden. But what are your thoughts on the secondary, Jack? Because everyone's going to be talking about it. It's been the biggest weakness for this team for years, and it was a solid performance overall, but on that that touchdown drive makes people nervous, and then Kirkwood got beat later in the game. So what are you thinking about the secondary for UCLA right now after these first 2 games?
Definitely an improvement over last week for UCLA secondary, I would say. I mean, 3 interceptions against Jalen Maiden, 2 of which by Alex Johnson, so he deserves some love after that game for sure. But I mean, one sequence in particular you talk about with this secondary, I guess this defense as a whole, you go into the third quarter and you look at that sequence where I think Dante Moore got sacked from blindside, ball fumbles out, and that San Diego State initially looked like they had recovered it in the end zone for a touchdown, ends up being at the 1-yard line. And then the UCLA defense proceeds to get 2 stops against 2 rushing plays. No gains there for San Diego State. And then San Diego State, there's an interception right out of a scene from Super Bowl 49 in the end zone. And just like that, UCLA is one of its best defensive sequences in years that I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was funny. I think after the game, was it Oladejo that said we wanted to be in that scenario?
Yeah, he said something along those lines of like, getting put in that situation, it's kind of what you want, especially after, the call gets overturned. You go from touchdown to 1-yard line. It's like, can a defense prove themselves? Can they get a stop in the tightest of situations? And Darius Muasau comes down with the ball in that tip drill, and all of a sudden you've got the ball back.
Yeah, and I mean, it took a lot to get to that point, because after that first touchdown from Dante Moore to Josiah Norwood, like we said, San Diego State comes back and evens the game at 7. But then from there on out, UCLA kind of takes over. Dante Moore leads another very solid drive, 7 plays, 75 yards, finishes with the touchdown on a really creative play by Chip Kelly. We're going to get to Chip in a second, because I thought he had a very strong performance as a coach. He comes out in that unique formation on a 4th and 1 at the 13. He's got Carson Steele, Colson Yankoff, and Anthony Atkins in the backfield with Dante Moore. And if you're San Diego State, which is a very good rush defense coming into this game, you're like, who the heck am I guarding? Or who's going to get this ball, right? You see 3 strong ball carriers. That one ended up being Carson Steele, but Joseph and I were kind of talking about it. Later in the season, that could be someone else. You can get really creative with that.
Yeah, I think, they did it in week 1, and it was a garbage keeper. Then they do it this week, and it's a Steele handoff. I think there's 4 plays there. I think that's going to be their go-to 4th and short if they want to get the ball. And there's 4 different running options. You can hand it to Atkins, hand it to Yankoff, hand it to Steele, or have the QB keep it. And they're going to be able to keep teams on their toes, because it's hard to tell, when there's 4 options off one play, who are you going to stop?
Right. And Chip has shown that if he sees what he wants to see from a defense in short yardage, an opposing defense in short yardage situations, he's going to go for it. I think I was watching the Cal game this summer, just kind of recapping that game, and he had like a 4th and 2 at his own 40 or something that he went for, where he literally on 3rd and 2, I believe, runs the handoff to Colson Yankoff, gets stuffed, and then yet runs the exact same play on 4th and 2, and it works out. So he's proven that if it's a 3rd or 4th and short, and he likes what he sees, he's going to go for it. He's going to run a play. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does with that formation going forward. We talked about that second touchdown, puts it to 14-7. Then UCLA gets a stop. They come out, 3 plays, 3 carries. TJ Harden, the 3rd one, he breaks an inside zone for 59 yards. Harden and Steele, both very solid performances. Jack, who do you think? Is there going to be someone that takes a lead in this backfield, or is UCLA perfectly fine with it being a two-man attack that works perfectly well?
I really don't think this is a team that's going to have a clear-cut number 1 running back. I think this is going to be a dual attack all season long for UCLA, because it's worked really well from these past few games. I mean, we saw the passing game work really well for UCLA. Kind of the rushing game took a little bit of a step back, maybe compared to week 1, but really it was the same story from week 1. And so I think that's not going to change at all going forward for UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, it's UCLA has been a huge running team since Chip Kelly's been there. Obviously, last year, Zach Charbonnet took a large load. But I think Chip probably prefers to have a balanced backfield with 2 clear guys. He talked in the offseason about wanting bigger, stronger running backs that can handle a heavy workload. So Steele and Harden are going to be the guys. Keegan Jones, ironically, I think he had the first catch of the game on a little check down, and then we didn't hear from him the rest of the game. So I think he's going to be less of a weapon than we thought. But someone that is a weapon is J. Michael Sturdivant. Kind of a medium, quiet-ish game from him. But on one of those drives, he draws 2 pass interferences, catches another ball, and that eventually led to a touchdown. What do you think of his performance just after the huge blow-up game in week 1?
Yeah, I think that he's kind of maybe has this like scouting report out on him that he's a big, deep threat. And so maybe the way it seemed like every time you kind of looked over to what he was doing, he was kind of going on a go route. So I think we might be able to see it's either he's going to be running goes, and if they leave him up one-on-one, they'll challenge that and try and go over the top. Otherwise, he's pulling the safeties or pulling one of the safeties to his side of the field and leaving things way open on the other side. So I think that's kind of the role that he's elevating into. And it worked really well on that one drive. He drew 2 pass interference calls, and I think the rest of the game he didn't get super targeted, but probably safety help is drifting over the entire time. And then all of a sudden, Logan Loya's got 4 catches for 77 yards because the middle of the field is wide open.
Right, exactly. And that kind of perfectly transitions into that last touchdown drive of the first half, where UCLA comes out, this kind of not 2-minute drill, but the tempo was definitely up. Dante Moore had a beautiful rollout on a 3rd and 4. He dives for a first down. A couple plays later, throws a ball up the seam to the tight end, and then hits Logan Loya for that touchdown. I think that drive really showed that Dante can, kind of work when the offensive line isn't doing its best in pass protection. I thought they kind of underwhelmed in that regard. You talked about the fumble that Dante had the O-line overall was a little shaky in pass protection. But for Dante to be able to have that rollout, he had the nice play over the seam where he kind of had a rusher in his face, and then Loya was wide open. But that pushed the score to 28-7 or 28-10. That was the halftime score. And if you're Chip Kelly, you go into the half feeling great. They had a little miscue at the end with him calling timeouts and everything, and them not getting a play out of that. But you go up 28-10 at halftime. That's exactly where you want to be. And a huge reason why they're up 28-10, short of talking a little bit more about the defense, San Diego State could not run the ball at all. This is a team that loves to run the football, and they could not run the ball all game. You look here, Keenan Kristen, the leading rusher, 27 yards on 9 carries. Jalen Maiden, a very athletic quarterback, 9 carries, 18 yards. Martin Blake, 5 carries, 17 yards. As a total, 33 carries for 63 yards for a San Diego State team that ranked in the top 30 in rushing coming into the season, averaging over 200 yards per game. What does that say about the defensive line, the linebacker unit, to be able to do what they did against a team like San Diego State running the football?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest stories coming to the season for UCLA was this front seven, how strong that defensive line can be, and they were really strong against Coastal Carolina. It was the same case against San Diego State. They made it really hard for San Diego State to really exploit their own strength, and they had to go to the passing game more they wanted, and as we know, their passing game is pretty poor. It just didn't work out for them. So, yeah, tells us even more about how good this defensive front is going to be for UCLA moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll see. I think it's kind of a good preview for what that Utah game will be. A team that likes to run the football, likes to be physical. UCLA secretly kind of matches up really well with Utah in that game, and we'll talk plenty about that when we get to that game. But I think the pass rush was solid. Maiden, you're not really going to be, pinning your ears back and rushing straight at him because you know how well he can run the football. But he did a great job, or they did a great job stopping him. The secondary, we're going to get back to it now because I want to introduce a new segment. We're going to be ranking UCLA's secondary because kind of some question marks. Devin Kirkwood got beat a couple times. John Humphrey, shaky. So I'm going to give you guys like 15, 20 seconds. We're going to be ranking the secondary. We're going to be talking about Devin Kirkwood, John Humphrey, Alex Johnson, Kamari Ramsey, and is that good enough there, you think?
Jalen Davies.
We'll talk about Davies too. I mean, I think he's going to be at the top of most people's list. We'll throw Davies in there as well. So I'll go with my rankings. I'll let you guys cook real quick. I'm going to have Jalen Davies number 1. I just think he's not only the best corner, but also the most important player in that secondary because of kind of how weak the 2 other outside corners are. So I'm going to go Davies 1. I've been really impressed with Kamari Ramsey. I'm going to have him 2nd. Just really solid at that strong safety, free safety spot. This is when we get shaky. I guess Alex Johnson goes 3rd. He had 2 interceptions in that game and is kind of just doing what he does at the slot corner position. And then finally you have Kirkwood and Humphrey. Kind of a toss-up. Believe it or not, I'm still going to have Kirkwood over Humphrey. I think he's the more talented player. He has the better potential, higher upside. He just hasn't shown it yet. So we'll go to Joseph now. Do you have differences? I assume you do.
Yeah, I'll go a different direction. I've got Alex Johnson at 3. I think his San Diego State game performance was really good. 2 interceptions is nothing to blink at. But I'm going to put Kamari Ramsey at 1 and then Jalen Davies at 2. I think Kamari Ramsey's presence on the field is just, like you said, it's been really impressive, and it's really impressed me in a really big way. He's just kind of been all over the place, giving help where it needs, making tackles. And I think that he's been a really big impact, especially when you look at a safety position that had question marks coming into this season with some of the departures after last year. And then Davies has been pretty locked down on the outside. And then I'll put Humphrey over Kirkwood at the 4 and 5. But it's really close. And I think Devin Kirkwood, he has 1 or 2 good games. All of a sudden, he's looking at, challenging Alex Johnson for that 3 spot, maybe.
Yeah. I'll just add real quick. I think it was Kirkwood was starting opposite Davies in the first game. It looked like Humphrey was kind of the starting outside corner opposite Davies in week 2. So we'll see week 3 against a weak opponent that we'll get to in a second.
They rotate a lot.
Yeah.
It's very much like this drive is Humphrey and Davies. This drive is Davies and Kirkwood. This drive is Humphrey and Kirkwood.
I was surprised that there was even a single drive where Davies wasn't on the field, and ironically, that's where the big ball was caught on Kirkwood for the touchdown. If that's Davies, maybe it's a different story. Jack, what about you? How are you ranking the secondary?
I think Davies is definitely the clear-cut number 1 for the secondary. Give me Alex Johnson at 2. The hype is, I think, kind of real after this past game against San Diego State. I mean, and partially because I think he's going to take a little bit of a step forward in the secondary over Devin Kirkwood, because Kirkwood in this game, there's a point where he gets burned on one play and you see him go off to the sidelines, throw his hands up in the air, look like he's completely confused. And you have to wonder how frustrated he's getting with his level of play. Maybe some coaching there. I don't know. Don't want to speculate too much. But I think Johnson could be a more consistent member of the secondary moving forward in the starters. So I'd give him a number 2.
Okay. Yeah. We'll have probably the full ranking somewhere, maybe, hopefully. We'll see, post-production.
I will say, I think that Alex Johnson, his role is really interesting. And I wanted to say this, that Dan Lin in yesterday's game was kind of shifting between this 4-3 defense and this nickel defense. And Johnson's role as the nickelback kind of makes it difficult for him to be on the field at all times. And I feel like maybe if he shifts into that more outside cornerback role, we'll see him excel. But if he's not on the field as much, it might be harder for him to make that impact, that the 2 interception impact that was evident yesterday.
Yeah, he's a slot corner. I think he's going to stay there, and we'll see. I think Oladejo had a great game when they switched from nickel to 4-3. A lot of versatility on the defense.
I've just gotten really fascinated by all the defensive formation stuff. It's been like my niche the last 2 weeks.
You called me formation guy last pod, and now look at you. You're on the same boat.
Just flexing his football knowledge.
Yeah,
on me
I don't want to say I'm a trendsetter or anything like that, but anyways, we're gonna go rapid fire with a couple over unders. We got segments every week. I know some people are going to be heartbroken we're not doing the pyramid. We decided we're going to wait until there's a more clear-cut depth chart, starting rotation, so we can have the starters up, leave it at that. It's coming, all right? Probably by the Utah game when Chip Kelly has a more, defined rotation. But quick couple over-unders. UCLA is playing NC Central next week. Shout out to UCLA for having another HBCU coming to the Rose Bowl. I think that's a great concept. Martin Jarman, shout out to him for setting that up. But let's be honest, NC Central, not very strong opponent. They are 2-0, but just looking real quick, they beat Winston-Salem State 47-21, and they beat North Carolina A&T 30-16. No offense to either of those schools, but they're not UCLA. So we've all got UCLA winning. We can get to our score predictions in a second. But the first over-under is over-under 2.5 drives from Ethan Garbers in Week 3. He did not play at all against San Diego State. We think he's QB2, I assume, in the rankings there. Colin Schlee got some run in the San Diego State game, showed off his legs. Over under 2.5 drives, and give me 1 or 2 sentences why.
Give me the under. I think Ethan Garbers might get flexed to quarterback number 3 because Chip's going to want to see more of Colin Schlee in this game. I think he's giving maybe the entire second half to Colin Schlee.
Interesting. Joseph?
I'll take the over. I think that Garbers is just going to get enough garbage time play once UCLA presumably takes a pretty big lead to let him get some run.
I'm going to take the over as well. Garbers, garbage time play. I think UCLA, if they were up 28-10 against San Diego State at the half, at least that against NC Central. So I'm going to take the over as well. Next over-under. Do we go? We're going to talk about the Pac-12 a little bit. The rankings just came out on Sunday. 8 teams in the AP Top 25. At the end of the season, over-under 5.5 teams ranked in the top 25 in the Pac-12.
Give me the over. I think we'll see at least 6, maybe 7. This is a really talented conference this year, and there's just so many at the top. USC, Oregon, Washington, Oregon State. Washington State is peeking their head in. Utah, and then Colorado. What Deion Sanders is doing over there. So I think 6, maybe 7 teams is totally reasonable to see at the end of the season.
He takes the over. What about you, buddy?
I'm on the same page. I mean, all the same sentiments to what Joe's just said. I think the Pac-12 is loaded, pretty ironic in its last year as a whole conference. But yeah, I think definitely the over on this one.
All right. I've been on the fence. I mean, let's just go through it. You've got USC, of course. I think you've got Washington. You've got Oregon. And then I think it gets a little interesting between Colorado, Utah, Oregon State, UCLA. I'll still probably take the over. I think Utah stays there. I think Oregon State probably stays there. And I think either UCLA or Colorado. I think one of those 2 teams will be there. So, yeah, I guess we have 3 overs there. Last one, and this is the one that I think a lot of fans are going to care about. UCLA. Over under 8.5 regular season wins at the end of the campaign.
I'm taking the under here. I made some controversial upset picks back when we had our first episode of the podcast this season. I think I had them losing to Washington State and Arizona State. Maybe not Arizona State, given how these first few weeks have panned out for them, but I still think UCLA is very prone to the inexplicable loss, as I've coined the term, and I don't think that's going to change, even though, yes, this offense has shown quite a lot these first few weeks.
I'll take the over. I think they go 9. I think losses to USC, then Oregon State, probably going to happen, especially with those both being road games. But then, a coin toss between winning against Colorado at home, beating Utah on the road. I think they probably win one of those games. So put me at 9-3.
I'm on the same wavelength as the Crosbynator. I'm going to take the over as well. Same thing. I think they lose to USC. All offseason, I've said there's no way UCLA's losing to Oregon State. I think UCLA's losing to Oregon State. I think I've changed my mind on that one. But I think they're going to beat Colorado. I still think that by the time UCLA plays the Buffaloes, that there's no depth on that roster. I know that the stars are stars, but I think eventually the lack of depth will catch up to them. And then we'll see Utah's. We don't really know what the heck Utah is, to be honest. But
Cam Rising or lack of Cam Rising has become a real question mark in the Utah backfield.
Exactly. I think by week 4, I think we might see him regardless of if he's 90% or 100%, because they really easily could have lost that game. But yeah, that's our over-under. Now we're going to preview real quick the NC Central game. Not really looking at the opponent, as much as just what do we want to see from UCLA? What are the question marks? Obviously, I feel like it's been quarterback, and rightfully so. It's the most important position in sports. I'm going to stick to that. But maybe outside of a quarterback, if I assume we see Dante Moore first, maybe Chip might give the media a bone and name a starter at some point. That would be crazy. But outside of quarterback, what do you want to see? Running back split, secondary, maybe Kyle Ford show up. What do you want to see?
You took the words right out of my mouth. I want to see more Kyle Ford. I think he was there was a lot of, maybe hype isn't necessarily the right word, but a lot of chatter about him kind of in the offseason coming into camp, transferring out of USC. And I feel like he hasn't gotten a chance to shine necessarily yet. So maybe just seeing more Kyle Ford play, more Kyle Ford targets in that game might be an interesting way to look at the depth in the receiver room, because now we've seen a J. Mike game, we've seen a Logan Loya game. What can Kyle Ford do?
I want to see this offensive line really dominate in this game.
Took the words from my mouth. What a guy.
Read your mind, Gavin. Read your mind all the time.
There you go.
Yes, sir. But no, I mean, we saw them take a step forward in this game against San Diego State. And I think when you're going against a team like this, NC Central, not a good team by any standard against that UCLA is going against. I think this is a game where you really want to give Dante some good, a good comfortable pocket, give him a lot of opportunities to really put up some big numbers on this defense. And I think the offensive line at this point in the season, you're starting to gel a little bit, and you want to see, your quarterback get really comfortable in that offense. So I think this is a game where we want to see more of the offensive line.
Yeah, I think a goal for the Bruins should be 1 sack tops. I mean, I thought that the pass protection was questionable. The run, obviously, like you said, the run blocking was fantastic. But whoever the quarterback is, they should not be getting touched very much in this game. For me, I guess I'll stick with the secondary, specifically the outside corners. Kirkwood, Humphrey, who's going to be the guy? We know it's Davies. We know it's Johnson in the slot. Safeties look great. We know the front 6 or 7 looks fantastic. Who's going to be the second corner on the outside? Is it going to be Humphrey? Is it going to be Kirkwood? That's what I want to see. But yeah, other than that, I don't even know the spread. I don't know if they're going to have a spread. I think UCLA's got to be favored by 3-4 touchdowns. We'll go. Before we end this pod, score predictions, UCLA, NC Central, week 3 at the Rose Bowl. What do you got?
48-13 UCLA.
48-13.
I'll go 35-7.
35-7. I'm going to go 49-10. I think this offense is going to get better and better. Logan Loya said it. But yeah, all right, we'll see what happens. We'll see who's right. I'm going to be right. I usually am right.
I'm probably going to change my mind at some point, but we'll stick to that for now.
Yeah. All right. Regardless, Daily Bruin will have coverage all week, previews, scouting reports, notebooks, all that good stuff. Make sure you're checking out all of our content. I think Joseph's got a column coming out, 5 things. We got all sorts of great football content, so make sure you're going to the Daily Bruin website. And as for this pod, this fantastic pod that you love so much, that you're watching right now, that you continue to watch because it's getting better and better every week. Is there anything better than the Out of Bounds podcast?
No, there is not, Gavin. No, there's not.
Not that I've seen yet.
As Joseph's hair will be getting better on every episode as well. But
wow, yeah. Really? You had to go there?
Hey, it looks great. I think it looks great. It looks great. But yeah, that's all for this episode. UCLA will be at home against NC Central. That was all for Out of Bounds. You can listen to this episode and every episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. You can check out our YouTube, UCLA Daily Bruin, to watch the video version. A transcript will be on dailybruin.com. That's all we got for you today. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Take care.